You're with Julian on the Brown Note and a review of the Sia movie Music, which is one of the most notorious bad films of the modern day and has seen critics absolutely go mental all over it. About 8% on Rotten Tomatoes. Built up a big head of steam in the advance with Sia coming out saying stop judging the film until you've seen it. And most of the appropriation about the film goes on the lead girl making a very gurning performance of autism, the general portrayal of autism being extremely wrong, and the continual interruption of the film for musical interludes. It's got trashed like nothing we've seen for a long time, and it really made me want to watch it. So much rage has come out. Like, I think Sia built it up quite a lot because she actually came out with those comments saying about how people shouldn't judge it until it's come out, because all the critics went, now we've seen it, and they've just got their baseball bats out and been bashing it. She wrote it, Sia, the Aussie musician, wrote it with Dallas Clayton, and it stars Maddie Ziegler as an autistic teenage girl who lives with her grandmother, and her grandmother dies in the apartment in New York, in Sesame Street, apparently. Sesame Street, the whole film. And that brings in Kate Hudson. Kate Hudson's the daughter, so this is the grandmother looking after the teenage girl, who goes about her happy, blissful, gurning existence, constantly pulling a face, which is the biggest problem in the film because it's made people think that it's incredibly offensive towards autistic people. Then Kate Hudson, who is a recovering alcoholic, drug addict, comes back into her life, initially seeking to get money out of the whole equation and wanting nothing to do with her with her own sister. And the guy down the hall is played by Leslie Odom Jr. from the musical Hamilton. He is, I guess, an African immigrant in the country who we discover is suffering from AIDS. There's not a lot of subtlety going on in this film. And Kate Hudson and him form a bond. Kate Hudson learns to love again and be a good person. And it follows that quite simplistic path of Kate Hudson learning to love herself through learning to love her autistic sister and becoming a better person and forming a bond with the Leslie Odom Jr. guy down the hall, having a romance with him. It's got absolutely destroyed by critics, and I watched it so I could put the boot in too. And I have to say, I'm going to give it a positive review. Virtually no one has given it. 92% of critics on Rotten Tomatoes have trashed it. Now, the initial problems with the film are at their worst in the opening 5 minutes. Watching the girl, played by Maddie Ziegler, walk around doing the gurning face, which she has virtually the entire movie, is a problem. It's almost like Ricky Gervais or some British satire show that they wouldn't even allow on air, doing a very deliberately offensive version of a disabled person. And what Sia was thinking, I think another part of this film is the fact that it took about 5 years to make. So there were definitely problems along the way for first-time director Sia. But it's an overwhelming thing to see this girl constantly pulling her face, banging her head, and delivering a very cartoonish version of autism. Then there are the musical interludes, which happen sort of every, 7 or 8 minutes, where I can understand Sia being attracted to this story. Because in her head, her examination of autism is that this girl has and this girl was the star of many of Sia's videos as well. In her head, the idea of autism is that they go off into a music video inside their own head. It's a very trite idea of what autism is. And also the fact that it's got a lot of notorious scenes where people say terrible things, like right at the start again, when Maddie Ziegler has a fit or an episode, Leslie Odom Jr. comes into the apartment and jumps on top of her to control her, which is a very controversial method of dealing with somebody having a fit in autism anyway. but he says, "I'm not hurting her, I'm smothering her with my love." Now, you're in some pretty wild territory. But honestly, there was a lot I actually enjoyed about this film. Unfortunately, 50% of what I enjoyed about this film was how bad it was. I'm a big fan. I'm an aficionado of car crash films, and this is right up the top of the pile. But I'd say this. There are a number of ways that a really bad film can actually be enjoyable to watch, and one of them is not being boring. Nothing in this film is boring. It is a wild ride from start to finish. It's quite tight. It really isn't that bloated. It has no superfluous characters. For all the bashing that Sia has got in this film, she does a number of filmmaking things quite well. There aren't superfluous characters. The three main characters are actually really well defined. They're actually really likeable people. And I think if you're going to make a bad film, don't make it boring and be amiable. Because if this was a serious film about autism, it would be an absolute disaster if they'd have done it like this. But it is kind of a musical comedy. Think Sesame Street. This is Sesame Street on LSD, where they continually go off onto these mad musical escapades. And that is supposed to be, I guess, a representation of where this person's mind is in autism, that she sees the world around her differently, and it's like a Sia music video. Which are all, it's a really colourful film. I would say this, I think that Sesame Street has dealt with autism. I've seen some of the clips, and it's a lot more sophisticated than this one does. But I found it really hard to hate. What I really thought about this film is, it's like you're at a party and everyone's a bit self-serious. And there's this person that is so nice and they're just so try hard and they just want everyone to have a good time. And they get up and they start dancing and you're cringing. But at some point you realise you're cringing because you're an asshole. And I would be that person. I'd be like, well, they're trying so hard and they're really nice. And then you kind of get into the groove of it. So I think after about 10 minutes or about 20 minutes of this film, I'd gotten used to, I'd acclimatised to who they were. And kind of was like going along for the ride. For me, this was the same. The thing is, when this film isn't doing terrible things, Kate Hudson's excellent in this film. I love her look, by the way. I think she's probably made a lot of gay women fans from this film. It's a really good look for her. And I don't mean this in an offensive way, I really appreciated her Free the Nip campaign in this film because they're out and proud all the way through the film and no one ever notices. And I thought that's really rare in a film because she wears next to nothing even when she's going into like posh clothing stores. She's just wearing the same stuff she does in bed and she's very much on display. But it's never even mentioned or referenced. And I thought that was a pretty cool thing, actually, even though it makes me sound deeply creepy. And the other guy, he's got that Denzel Washington very easygoing charisma that makes you very, very comfortable. Their exchanges are really quite nice. I actually enjoyed watching them talking. So I did actually enjoy about half of this terrible film. And the other half of it I really enjoyed because it was such a wild ride. It was just pure insanity. So even though it does jar, I didn't find it came across as a serious expose or investigation into autism. It came across more as a musical comedy. And yeah, I knew all of the trite and bad things that were in it. But the actual course of the movie, I actually enjoyed watching. So I would recommend seeing it because half the time your head will be in your hands, shaking your head, just incredulous at what you're seeing. Even the music video moments, you're just watching the actors gyrate and dance is just shocking. And the other half, they're an amiable group of people, and Kate Hudson's really good in the role. Probably the best I've seen in an actress that has probably the worst Rotten Tomato count of about 30 movies, which are all around 13%. But she's great in this film. So I would give a guarded recommendation on watching this because I found it a great deal of fun. It made me kind of happy, and all of the bad stuff in it is so off-the-wall, crazy entertaining to watch. And I hope that the young actress Maddie Ziegler doesn't get too tarnished with this, because when she drops that face, she's stunningly beautiful, and she looks like she could act really well, and we already know that she is capable of throwing herself with full commitment into incredibly brave roles from this. So I hope she gets out of this without anyone blaming her. And Sia, you did a few good things here, filmmaking wise. So I had a lot of fun watching music, and I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 because I enjoyed it, even though I wasn't supposed to enjoy all of it.